Are you new to helium? Are you thinking of introducing it into your business but not too sure what to do? Well, stay tuned because Sue Bowler from BAPIA is here to explain to you everything you need to know. Hello, Greg from Blue Market here and welcome to BMTV. And we have a guest that hasn't been here for quite a while. It's Sue Bowler, everybody, from BAPIA. Hello, Sue.
Hello, Greg.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you very much.
Where have you been?
Busy, busy, busy.
Growing BAPIA.
Growing BAPIA, preparing for a new course that we're going to launch very soon. Just lots of stuff going on.
But the main topic of conversation today is helium.
Absolutely.
And you're going to tell us all about helium.
Yeah, just introduce it and I know more and more people are using helium, which is great. But it's just to make sure that everybody is completely sort of understanding sort of the rules about helium.
So it's the basics we're going to start with. So we're not going to get too complex, mainly for the benefit of you and me. Yes. Okay, let's start with what is helium, Sue?
So helium is the second lightest gas known to man. Mm-hmm. It is, extremely light in terms of it will lift. Unlike air, obviously, which is a very, very heavy molecule. Yeah. It is a mined product, and it's mined from just a very few mines around the world. There are concerns with people that it might be a limited resource, but actually they are finding more and more helium. Yeah. It's a byproduct of something else, so they find it when they're actually doing other gases, and it's captured. So and then obviously it's captured, and generally it's used in things like medical uses, for diving. It has lots of very, very specific uses as a product. It's used in I think like in the all the different pipelines, because obviously that's the best way to discover any leaks.
If there's any leaks, yeah.
But what we're using is not pure helium. And
that's one of the things I wanted to mention, is that a lot of people say, oh, it's a waste of something that should be used for MRI scanners and medical and etc. But it's actually different, isn't it?
It's actually very different, and we're actually using a recycled product. Yeah. So once the gas has been used in such an MRI scanner, it is captured. It can't be used for any other purposes. It's now not pure enough. And so what the gas companies do is they take it back and then they recapture it and they use it as something called balloon gas. Okay. And it cannot be used again for medical purposes or any of those purposes. Yeah. So we are actually doing something really good, because if we weren't using it, it would just be
dissipate into the atmosphere.
It would be released. Yeah. So when we talk about balloon gas, we're talking about a product that has already been used once, and that we're recycling it basically.
Yeah, so that's something good to tell your customers. If your customers were to say that to you and say you shouldn't be doing this, is just explain that to them, that it is actually a good thing.
Definitely.
So that's what it is in a nutshell. How does it come? It comes in cylinders, doesn't it? What are the different types of cylinders? How do we use it?
So we've got various different cylinders. We've got generally 200 bar and 300 bar, which probably doesn't mean a great deal to anybody. Basically, that's the pressure that the gas is at within the cylinder. Yeah. And that allows the gas to then be forced out to inflate a balloon. Yeah. We don't need to work at it with it at 200 bar, and that's a way of just putting the content in there. When we work with it, it's right down to about 14 bar, although we can, with a manual tilt valve, we can actually get it slightly higher, but for the basically the force. So getting the helium out of a cylinder safely is really important. Okay. So for that purpose, we're going to use what we call a regulator.
We're using pretty much probably the most common type of cylinder.
Absolutely.
So this is a BOC cylinder, and we're going to get some helium out of it, aren't we?
We are, but before we go into that, I just wanted to comment the fact that it's on a trolley.
Yep.
If you are working with helium, if it is a cylinder, particularly something like a V size, which is the smaller size, you've got to really make sure, with all helium, but this one's very lightweight, but all cylinders should always be secure. So whether it's on a trolley or whether it's on a stand, if you're in a venue, make sure, and you haven't got those, make sure that you secure it to something that will hold the weight of the cylinder. So
like you say, particularly this one, because it's so long and narrow, if that wasn't on there, that's very easy to knock over. Not that I've ever done that.
No, but and something I need to talk about about is this green collar.
Yeah.
So not all countries have this collar, which drives me insane. You know, you go to I've often taught in Europe, and this is all exposed.
Oh.
And this is the most vulnerable part of the cylinder. So the collar is there to protect that. So if the cylinder did fall, the collar will protect it and stop that from shearing off.
Yeah.
But you've still got to have safety precautions as well. So for example, if I was transporting this in a vehicle, you need to really consider how you're going to transport it in terms of the weight of it, and just think what would happen if I did an emergency stop. That would roll forward. It could really push your car around. So you would never, or your van, so you would never transport it without securing it in your vehicle.
Absolutely.
I've seen cylinders on the back of people's car seats, and I just think, oh my goodness, even the smallest braking could kill them, you know, because of the force of that cylinder.
Well, this weighs 3.5-ish stone, I think. An L size weighs about 5 stone, and T size is 5 stone, and the L is 13 stone.
Yeah.
So the L is 5 feet tall and it's 13 stone. If you have that in the back of your car,
well, you wouldn't be able to get it in, but it would in your vehicle.
Well, if you put your seats down, you did that, so it was facing that way.
It'd be a torpedo.
It'd be a torpedo, exactly. So
please consider how you transport it. When I used to take cylinders in the back of my car, what I had was a half a pallet.
Yeah.
And then we turn it upside down, so you had the grooves.
Yeah.
We would put the cylinder into the groove, and then we would bungee strap it in, and then we would bungee strap it to the side.
Yeah.
So it could not even move an inch.
Yeah.
And even then, I drove very cautiously, really, really careful. And the other thing is, I'm just about to demonstrate how to put the regulator on here. Please never transport a cylinder with a regulator on, because that then becomes a very, very weak point. If the cylinder starts to roll and that shears off, the helium will escape at a very, very high rate, and again could cause a lot of damage, and B, you know, having helium in your vehicle escaped is not a good thing. Yeah.
That's one thing to point out. It is an asphyxiant. So
it absolutely is.
Yeah, if you see people breathing it in and having squeaky voices and everything, and you absolutely shouldn't do that, because some people have actually died because of that, haven't they? So unfortunately,
I mean, it's a rare occurrence in terms of accidental inhalation. But it really, you know, always, you know, we have care cards, and on the care card we actually say, please do not inhale helium. It is an asphyxiant, it can kill. I mean, other than the fact that it's a heavy cylinder and it is an asphyxiant, it's actually quite a safe gas.
Yeah, it's not flammable.
It's not flammable, it's an inert gas, it's completely, people actually use helium in extinguishers, because of the nature of the helium, it can actually extract the oxygen from the fire, and therefore it will put the fire out. So it has got its good purposes other than for floating balloons as well.
All right, should we get some helium out?
Yeah, so let's get a regulator. So
what are we starting with? This one?
Yeah, we're going to start with this one. This is very good. This is a 10-foot extension hose, which means you can work a little bit remotely from your cylinder, which again, if you're inflating balloons into a sizing template, it's actually really nice to have something like a trigger valve. But you've also got just a general regulator on here. Let's just talk about the other ones before we put this on, just so that everybody can see what we're talking about and it doesn't make for confusion. So this is probably one of the biggest selling regulators in the UK. It's multi-purpose. It's actually got a latex outlet on here, but it's also got a foil outlet. So if you are inflating foil balloons with helium, we always recommend that you have this auto cut-off. And the way you identify it, this is like a connection that can go on here, is it looks a little bit like a spaceship. And therefore, when we actually inflate a foil balloon and we put that on, it will automatically cut out when the balloon is fully inflated, regardless of whether it's an 18-inch or whether it's a 3-foot or a shape or anything else. It has a kickback in here that understands that. So this is great. The pressure on this is really, really low, which you will hear when you use it. So where that we would normally use something like this, which is like a 14 bar, I think this goes down to something like 2 bar pressure. It's really, really low. So don't think that it's faulty because it's so slow. It's doing that for a reason. It doesn't want to damage the valve. and it wants to do it properly. Yeah.
Perfect.
So you can do this, so you can get a auto foil and a latex in one go. I love the 10-foot extension hose because, as I said, I like to work remotely. And it means I can buy all the different tools that I need and I can just switch them in and out as I need them.
So if you hire a cylinder, you would normally get offered something like that or a flex tip one.
Yeah.
Personal preference, have we got a flex tip one down there?
I didn't actually know.
No.
You prefer a flex tip because it's softer.
Yeah.
This can be really quite firm. We'll do that when we put it on. We can show people the difference in the noise. That's why I like the trigger valve.
Yeah, you've got a lot more control.
Yeah, you've got a lot of control on that. So we're going to do that.
Okay, are we going to put that on then?
Yeah, so on here you've got just several things. You've got, obviously, it's a screw fitting and it's hand screwed. It's not a wrench screw.
Yeah.
So you're just going to go hand tight. If you do overscrew it, as in you use something like a wrench, there's a little black ring here. It's called an O-ring, and that will get compressed, and then the helium will start to leak out of the tank. So that's why it's hand fitting. You've also got a gauge in here. This is a 200 bar cylinder. So when we put it on, if it's a brand new cylinder, it should read 200 bar.
Okay.
So if it reads 100 bar, we know we've only got half the contents left.
Yeah.
So it's a good way of gauging how much helium's left in the cylinder.
Let's turn this way so the camera can see.
So we're literally just going to rest the thread into the cylinder. Now with the collar, it is a little bit awkward. It's not easy. So you've just got to work your hands into position and keep screwing it until you've completely threaded it in place. Sometimes they put the collars in such a place that it's never easy. I think I'm just almost there.
But it should go on really easy as well.
It should go on easily. If it's not going on easily, it means you're misthreading it. So I've got to the point where that's as tight as I can get it with my hands. That's as much as you need to do. So don't worry about really cranking it up, because you remember that little O-ring.
Yeah.
Okay. Whilst we haven't got pressure in the cylinder, we can position this as we want it. So if we are going to be using this outlet here, which is the higher pressure, you want to get it in the right position, because once you've opened the cylinder, the whole system locks, and therefore you can't move anything.
Okay.
And so we're just going to open it up. So we just open it up gently, and it'll just click. That's it.
There you go.
But then you need to open it up to allow the gas to flow. If we don't completely open the cylinder, it can push back and you don't get a good flow. So we're just going to turn it a couple of times. And this one's actually reading, so let me just tell you how much helium you've got in here. It says 100 bar.
Okay, so
we know
there's plenty in there.
Yeah, so I reckon in this size cylinder, I think from memory, 100 bar, 200 bar on a V, is that about 100 balloons?
I don't know, there's a chart right there.
Yeah, I could have a look. Let's have a quick look. I can't remember on a V.
I can't remember.
125.
All right.
All right. And I think as an instructor, I would always say to people, work on 100 rather than 125, because you've got 25 then for poppages and overinflation, because some balloons you can overinflate without realising it. And so on costing value, work on 100.
Yeah.
Therefore, I know that I've got about 50 left in here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So that's open. Yeah. So let me just show you the difference. So this is going to be higher pressure, but not the full pressure that we've talked about, not the 200 bar. This is the knockdown pressure.
If you do open it up without anything on there, you know about it, don't you?
You really do, and it's not a good idea.
Yeah.
It really isn't.
The noise is, I don't know how many decibels it is, but it's very, very loud.
Yeah, it's quite scary. This is going to be pretty loud as well. I'm going to put a good push back on it.
Okay.
Ready, steady, go. Okay. Which a lot of people...
it was. I forgot how loud it was. Yeah.
And then, but this one is your trigger valve. So this is one we've got a lot more control on. Can you see? I can press it really gently, or I can go hard.
It's like being at the dentist.
Yes, it is, really, isn't it? But that will allow me to work at a comfortable speed and what I enjoy doing, rather than, not being too fast and too much under pressure. I know people in retail shops, whenever you get that hard push of gas, can actually upset customers because they jump. Whereas if you're using a trigger valve, at least it's a little bit gentler and not so. Okay, so that's that. So as I said, if we're going to use a foil outlet, what I recommend you do is you turn your gas off.
Yeah.
You release the pressure. Then you release the outlet.
That's just a snap-on.
These are snap-ons, and then you're going to put your next one on.
Yeah.
If you try and change those outlets under pressure, it is very hard because you're pushing against it, and that one can just pop off as well.
Yeah.
So now we're ready. We can open this one up again, and then you can hear how very low pressure.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's that. So when we finish working, I always recommend, even if you're not going to be moving your cylinder, always turn your helium off.
Indeed.
Because if there is the lightest or slightest little leak in there, you could actually lose your whole cylinder of helium overnight. They do recommend you do things like leak tests, and that's very simple. You can just put some soapy water in a spray container, like a spray, turn it on, just spray all around it, and watch to see if there's any bubbles form.
All right, okay.
And then if any bubbles form, then you know you've got a leak.
Yeah. Okay.
So if sometimes people think, I'm not getting as much helium out of my cylinder as I think I should be getting, that's when I would do a leak check.
It's very rare, but it does happen.
Very rare. It's seriously rare. But as I said, if somebody's damaged that O-ring, that's the sort of problem. And those are easy to replace. So and it's inexpensive.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've finished now. We've turned the gas off.
So you always vent it before you take that off?
Yeah, I always vent it. Again, you won't be able to release this without that. And then you can literally just undo. Do you want to hold that for me? It's a little bit complicated. The other thing is, if you are working with this cylinder, what you need to do is try and make yourself a bit of a holster for that.
Yeah.
Because what I often see is these getting dropped on the floor.
And this bit gets
broken. And I did
quite
notice
easily.
there was a little damage here. And that's when regulators get dropped, they do get damaged.
They do.
So when we're finished, we just remove it, and if we're going to pop it in a vehicle, this is the safest way. There we go.
Okay, cool.
But going back to safety and everything else, if you treat a cylinder well, and you do all the things like you don't transport it with a regulator on it, you secure it, it's a really easy product to work with. It's not as dangerous as it sounds. It's just respecting it. I always say to people, respect it.
Yeah. And where do you get it from? Well, I would say balloon markets. And you were saying earlier on about your first experience buying helium quite a few years ago.
Many years ago.
Do you want to share that story?
Yeah. So the first cylinder I ever bought, because I didn't know any differently, is I went to BOC. This is like 35 years ago. And because I was a new account and I was only buying one cylinder or renting one cylinder, over 35 years ago, it cost me £100 for that cylinder. Once I'd used that cylinder, and by that time I'd then grown my knowledge about wholesalers and everything else, I then realised that by buying it through my supplier, my wholesaler, I could actually save. I got it for a quarter. I think I paid £25.
A cylinder of helium for £25. Oh my word!
But I remember thinking at the time, if only I'd known that. If I'd have buying it through the right source, you're still going to get it from BOC or Air Products or Air Liquide, whoever you're buying it from, or whoever's but it comes through you, and you're the one that gets all the great discounts because you're buying multiple cylinders,
exactly,
or renting multiple.
So it's really easy at Balloon Market. You can just choose to either collect it yourself or have it delivered. It costs a lot more to have it delivered by a BOC lorry. So most people go and collect from their local gas agent. There's 300 and something around the country for each manufacturer, I think. And you can just buy it online, choose which one you want, and then somebody at the customer support the department here will just get in touch and say when do you want it and what time and everything, and sort it all out for you. So it's really easy, really, really easy. Yeah. And I'm sure it's similar with other wholesalers as well. So,
it's just definitely the best way to do it. Do not buy or rent directly from the source, as it were.
And that's the other thing. You're renting the cylinder. You don't own it.
No.
You're essentially buying the gas inside the cylinder is the way we sort of explain it to people.
Yeah, because cylinders are only allowed to be in circulation for 5 years before they have to be refurbished.
I did not know that.
There you go. Let's talk about balloons and temperature.
Okay.
Because that, again, is another great learning experience of mine. So helium reacts to temperature changes. So we need to be very aware of how the helium is going to work. So, for example, in the heat, as we are all have been experiencing over the summer, any helium work is quite tricky because once you take those balloons from like sort of like an air conditioner or even just a general temperature, and then maybe somebody collects the balloons and then takes them outside into the extreme heat, they will expand and they will pop. So it's really good to make sure that your customers are aware. For example, if they're collecting the balloons, even air-filled balloons will expand in the heat, but helium does definitely expand. So make sure that the air conditioning's on in the car and that they know to take them directly inside once they get to their location as quickly as possible, because and also allow for it on the inflation, because the balloons will expand so much so for example, on an auto foil shut-off on the helium foils, you might even want to go slightly less than the shut-off. By contrast, helium in the cold will shrink, and I learnt that. So, another story. So I learnt most of my problems, or most of my knowledge through experience by making mistakes or not knowing, and then having to find out what the problem was. So I started my business 2 weeks before Valentine's Day. I was obviously very nervous, and I'd sold all these helium-filled balloons. I prepared them all the night before, got up very early on Valentine's Day to do my deliveries. It was cold outside because it's early in the year, and as I stood outside the front door, my balloons started to go down. I had no clue why, no clue. So I ran back indoors, topped them all back up again, thinking, well, that's great. Started delivering them, walking into warm office buildings, and then they started popping. Because obviously what had happened is the helium had shrunk. I'd replaced that helium with more helium, and then once it got into the heat, it expanded, and that was way too much. So that was quite a harsh lesson to learn.
It is a bit scary though when you take a helium-filled foil balloon outside and it's cold, because you do think, oh no, what's happened?
I know.
And you just got to explain to your customers when they leave.
So as you're delivering it, we always suggest that you put it on the doorstep inside the house and just say, watch the magic happen, and once it starts to warm up, the balloons will come back to life. And it's, they need to understand that. And equally we need to say to them, please don't put them next to a radiator or a fire, because again, the reaction between cold and hot can have drastic effects as well. So we need to understand all the little things that can happen. So don't be afraid of it, but be aware of it. And the other thing is, don't do what I did. Try test these things out. Really, with hindsight, although I hadn't thought about it, I should have probably looked to see what happens when I took the balloons outside.
But you wouldn't think about that, would you?
I
think that's perfectly natural to not think about that.
Yeah, I've got some other examples of things that I did, and but learnt very quickly. But yes, I also put helium-filled balloons in a swimming pool once, into a swimming pool area. It was a birthday party for a child in their house, and they had a swimming pool, and they wanted all these helium-filled balloons in the pool area, not actually physically in the pool. And the humidity and the heat drastically expanded the balloons. So I had to almost have them squishy before I left them like that. And we actually did a test, because I had been warned, because they often say to you, take the helium to the place where you're actually going to position the balloon. So if you're working at altitude, for example, because that has an effect on helium. Helium is nowhere near as buoyant at altitude. And I learnt that from a training course, because I was teaching in Mexico City, and every helium-filled balloon I inflated did that, because the helium is just not as buoyant at an altitude.
Ah, right, okay.
So, helium has a really different, changes according to where it is. But so, for example, if you're working in a cold environment, for the balloons to be in a cold environment, as much as it's cold for you to do it, it's better for you to inflate them in the cold, because then you don't have that problem. And then again in the heat, inflate them in the heat. So what we did is, when we inflated them for the pool, we actually did a test run, because we didn't want to take the helium in there. And I put balloons at different varying degrees, and I think most of them popped. I hadn't altered the amount of helium significantly enough. It's really, I don't want to be putting people off.
But in the main, particularly if you're here in the UK, it's
every
pretty
day,
simple.
Just make sure you're secure, and Bob's your uncle, you're fine.
Okay.
So how long does a balloon float for? So that's quite a good one to think about. So there are helium charts, and we actually supply helium charts when we teach courses.
Yeah.
Generally, an 11-inch, 12-inch balloon will float for 18 to 24 hours, generally, depending on the manufacturer's balloon. So again, do a test. It's always a good thing. But will it look good 24 hours later? No, it won't. But we say generally a helium-filled 11-inch, 12-inch will look good for about 12 hours.
Yeah.
And what do I mean by looking good? It still looks as it did. It will lose...
It will be smaller.
It will definitely be smaller. In the first hour or so, you lose a significant amount because latex has a pore, and therefore the helium naturally escapes from the whole balloon. I think people think you have to tie the balloon really tight to stop the helium from escaping.
Yeah.
It's naturally escaping constantly. So we're going to use high float. So high float will allow us to extend the floating time significantly. It's not just by a day or two. It's a significant amount of time.
So how long would that balloon last with helium then?
Again,
roughly?
It changes according to the conditions that it's in. I mean, I think they suggest it can be like...
It's days though, isn't it?
Well, I think up to weeks.
Okay.
It can be suggested. Personally, I mean, I think, I don't know, let's 7 to 10 days.
Okay.
But I haven't done a test on it for a long time. I'm sure the product's still the same, but I haven't really measured it forever. Again, I recommend people do that. Do that test. Because once you've done that test yourself, you know, you've got the facts.
Yeah.
I think the biggest problem that people have is once they've used the high float is that they potentially don't inflate the balloon to its correct full size because they're a little bit cautious. And if we underinflate that balloon, then the balloon is naturally going to go down quicker anyway. And the weight of the high float will affect it as well.
Okay.
Okay.
So we're not going to actually inflate the balloon today, but what you're going to show here is how you apply high float.
The technique, yeah. So if you've got a cap like this, always use it because high float has got this horrible habit of drying within the equipment. And if it happens, it's not an issue except for the fact it's a very messy thing. You just have to take the whole thing out and wash it with soapy water and then clean it all out. So it's not the end of it, but it's important. So remove the cap, and then what I recommend to everybody, you've got a collar. These are like measuring collars. So this, I know that this particular collar is for an 11-inch, 12-inch balloon. Okay. And that sort of gives us the perfect amount. If we slide the neck of the balloon on and get the nozzle right to the top of the balloon, we want to try and contain the high float in the body of the balloon and not get it into the neck. Once you get it into the neck, it becomes messy and difficult to tie and not a great experience. You can turn it upside down. We're going to give it a little squeeze and put the measured amount in there. And at this stage, I'm going to squeeze all the excess off the nozzle. So again, I leave the nozzle nice and clean, but it's in the body of the balloon, and I'm going to remove it. And because I'm not going to do any more at this point, I'm going to put that back on again. Okay. And try and be tidy. So now we've got the high float inside. If you're doing a lot of balloons with high float and you don't need them immediately, like for example, if I had a big job tomorrow, corporate job, I could do them all today, no problem. I can prepare them all. I don't need to inflate them. I can actually bag them up, clip them up together, keep them in a cooler environment rather than a hot environment. I know some businesses in the US would probably refrigerate them if they were longer than a day and then take them out and get them back up to room temperature before you need them. So it's definitely a job. And there is a benefit to it because the high float inside a latex balloon will make the latex a little bit softer and then it actually stretches easier. So there are good factors there. But just make sure if you're storing them, store them neck up so that high float can't roll out. All right, so we're going to hold the balloon there so we don't get it into the neck. And we're just going to gently massage it in. There are rules that you can do this way, just roll it up. But what you don't want to be doing is mushing it up and making it frothy because once you do that, it's not as effective. So you just basically... Gently massaging. Just gently massaging it. You don't need to go crazy. That's completely fine. Once you've done that, you can inflate it, get it to its correct size, and then let it dry. So don't bag it. Don't be tempted to put it in a bag because if you do that, then the atmosphere around it can't allow it to dry and therefore it's not being effective. And it'll probably take about 2 to 3 hours to dry. And then you can bag them up. Perfect. Okay. That's that. Now, we touched on helium escaping, and I see you've got a prop over there. Oh yeah, this is an interesting Helium and Air. That's something I wanted to give you those. Right, so I did this yesterday. So it's just a little bit of an example of when we mix helium with air. There are some benefits to mixing helium with air. Like, let's go back to our conversation earlier about how long balloons float for.
Yeah.
So we talked about 3-foot balloons floating for 3 to 5 days if they're fully inflated. Most people don't need them to last that long. I mean, for example, I've done corporate jobs where I've got 120 tables with helium-filled balloons on them. I don't need them to last 3 to 5 days. Therefore, but I still want them to float. I can actually mix some air in with the helium, which will obviously save on the helium cost, but still be effective. And I'll still probably get a good couple of floating days out of those balloons.
Yeah.
There is a regulator, and it's called a 60-40 valve.
Yeah.
I definitely recommend it if you're in that boat of needing balloons to float for less time but still look good.
It's the bigger balloons.
It's the bigger balloons.
So you can't do that for your standard size balloons.
I wouldn't recommend it on anything smaller than a 16-inch.
Okay.
What you'll find is that the weight with the mix of the helium will actually weight the balloons down a little bit.
Yeah.
So if you try and attach things like a collar around the balloon or some ribbons or tulle or something like that, that could drag it down.
Yeah.
So be very aware of that. Again, do a test.
So people might have heard the phrase, don't mix your gases, and we're going to come to the kind of situation that you shouldn't mix your gases.
Yeah.
But what you've just described, when the gases are actually physically together,
yeah,
that's absolutely fine.
Yeah, and the thing is when you put the air inside the 3-foot, for example, and then add your helium, the air actually helps to block the escape route.
Yeah.
So it acts as a little barrier because the helium is constantly moving around, which is what we're going to show here, and therefore it's all its escape routes are sort of hidden really.
Yeah.
And therefore it will actually slow the whole process down dramatically.
So what have you done here, Sue?
Okay, so yesterday I created these are 20-inch bubbles, and I put 5 balloons in each. All the balloons were sized to the same size across both sides. These ones were helium filled. Mm-hmm. So this is helium filled 5-inch inside a helium filled bubble. And these were different. So I actually put air inside the 5-inch, but helium into the bubble.
Okay.
What I wanted to demonstrate is that, as I said, they were all started off about 4 inches, 4.5 inches.
Yeah.
Now you can see how drastically bigger these are in here. So let me just hold them up a little bit higher. So some people might say, well, that's fine, that's not a problem, because actually these look better than this. Mm. But actually managing to get the perfect balance of air with helium is very, very difficult. And in many cases, these would have popped. So if I'd have inflated these any bigger in the first place with air, the chances are 2 or 3 of them would have popped by now.
So that is essentially because the molecules of helium are teeny tiny, mm-hmm, and they can go through the latex, which is why we use Highfloat if the helium's going on the inside.
That's right.
So you had this helium on the outside with air on the inside, so those teeny tiny little molecules can get in and go in between the air molecules and expand it.
Exactly. So the air can't go anywhere because the air is a very big molecule, and we know how long an air-filled balloon lasts for.
Yeah.
So the air does not escape quickly. So the air is all still there, but it's been joined by a whole load of helium molecules who are enjoying the party inside that balloon as well.
And you said off camera that if you overinflate a balloon, so say you overinflated one of these bubbles, and then more helium would be forced into those balloons and they would burst.
Yeah. So just the other thing that I thought we'd just talk about quickly is balloons and the environment, because obviously that's a massive issue.
Indeed.
And again, that's when customers could talk to you or be a little bit unhappy with the situation. So balloon releases. We have taken a stance across the industry, but with BAPIA, that we do not recognise balloon releases. Our opinion is what goes up comes down, mm-hmm, and whether it's a latex balloon, whether it's a foil, it really is damaging the environment. And again, it can have consequences with livestock and with marine life. So we've checked with EBPC, which is the European Balloon and Party Council, and there's very little evidence to support the damage that it has caused. Yeah. But there are environmentalists out there that will state, black is black is white, white is black.
Yeah.
So I think as a professional, we should recognise the fact that balloons, not even a single balloon, should ever be released.
I think as well, there's been a trend of releasing balloons at funerals, hasn't there?
And I can understand.
I get it, yeah.
I understand the theory behind it, but how about you have some white latex balloons that you've put some wildflower seed, or the child puts them in, ties it up, and then leaves a little message on there, and then they go to somewhere special and pop that balloon, allow the seed to scatter, and then bin the latex balloon afterwards, just so that they've got somewhere that they can go back to at a later date and to see, you know, the memory, you know, and it's adding good rather than bad.
Yeah. Well, Sue, thanks for that very comprehensive look at helium. That was great. So if anybody is looking to start using helium, you've got all the information you need right there. Right, as a guest on BMTV, I don't know if you remember this, but you've got to ask everybody the question of the week. So what is the question of the week, Sue?
Can anybody remember what bar pressure this cylinder starts at when you first get it?
Oh, quiz time. Okay. So leave your answer to that quiz question down below on Facebook and on YouTube. What is the bar pressure for this cylinder?
When it's full.
When it's full. Okay. So thank you so much for
pleasure.
that. And thank you everybody for watching. Thank you for subscribing. If you haven't, please do, and hit the bell icon. You'll be notified every time we upload a new show. Check us out on Instagram and check us out on TikTok, where the fun stuff happens. Stay happy and positive. See you next time. Bye.
Bye.